You have another bill, House Bill 799.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We had a constituent call us. It's on the same topic. But when he was released in 2020, after serving 12 years, he asked for a breakdown of his fees and fines so that he could begin paying them, and he realized that collection fees were a part of that. So when he asked about it, they told him to contact my office because it was in code that they could charge it. So this really showed an example of how folks who have finished their incarceration and are trying to pay back their fees get stuck behind because the collection fees are adding up before they're even released. So if you or I run up a bill using a line of credit and we don't pay it back in time, those accounts may be sent to collections, but the common understanding is that when we took out the debt, we were going to be able to pay it back. So that's not so with incarcerated people with the same rates that we just discussed at the 12 cents and the 55 cents. So House Bill 799 does not change the amount someone owes, but simply prevents collection fees from being added to an account until someone has been released. It also gives a 90-day grace period to allow them to, once released, to get a job, get housing secured, and start making some money so they can feed themselves and house themselves and make payments before incurring those collection costs. So quite bluntly, this is attempting to create a realistic pathway for someone to actually live up to the responsibilities that were a part of their punishment. The Commonwealth's attorneys of Norfolk, Portsmouth, Fairfax, Arlington, Loudoun, and Albemarle all support this bill. So I hope the committee will agree that collection fees shouldn't be added on until after a person has a chance to pay their debt.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions from members on the committee? All right. Okay, I understand that we have, well, first I'll ask, is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak to this legislation, either for or against? Okay, if you can come up and state your name, position, and position on the bill.
Eileen Longenecker with OES at the Supreme Court. We don't have a position on the underlying policy. With the way our systems work now, our financial systems, we cannot implement the legislation without significant changes. Our systems automatically, none of this is manual. Our systems automatically add the 17% when it's sent to collections. Collections are required to be sent, delinquent accounts are required to be sent to collection after 90 days. And our systems also are programmed such that there is no interest running on any of the defendants' accounts in a particular court if they're incarcerated, while they're incarcerated, and then for 180 days afterwards.
Can I just make sure I understand what you just said? You said there are no inmates who are being attributed what while they're incarcerated?
Interest.
Okay. All right.
And so these systems all work together in a very complex way. It's all done by programming. None of it's manual. And so I would just, again, we're not speaking to the underlying policy, but there would be a fiscal impact that we have yet to determine because of the nature of it in order to implement the legislation.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question for.
All right. Can you answer a question from Delegate Herring?
Just my understanding from what you said is that no interest is being incurred or attributed,
Right.
but there is a collection fee.
Right. That's required by budget language.
Okay, so but good, no interest, but still there's a fee already before even someone, unless they are wealthy and have somebody to pay it for them. And I'm curious, if someone was able to have a family member pay for them, then what happens?
If somebody walks into a court with a check for $50 and it's not the defendant, it will be applied to the account. If they say this is for Ms. Smith's account, then that would be applied. But the 17% is currently set out. It's required by budget language.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow-up question.
Go ahead.
So since it's required by budget language, I remember that there was a major period of time about 10, 15 years ago when we increased a lot of court fees just purely to get revenue. So my question to the witness is, this fee for collection is actually just a fee for collection. It's not paid to some sort of collection agency. It's what I'm going to call bookkeeping fee. It's not actually covering any sort of function of collection.
Mr. Chairman, that's actually not exactly correct. How it works is the 17%, when an account is delinquent and is sent to collections, it's required that the 17% be imposed. If, for example, a law firm is the collection agency, and this is up to the Commonwealth's attorney to decide how court debt should be collected, that is their decision by statute. If, for example, there is a contract with the law firm between the Commonwealth's attorney and the law firm that the collection rate is 35%, my understanding when the 17% was added on, it was the 35% collection fee that this law firm would be entitled to get by contract would decrease how much the state would receive of the fines and costs by 35%. By adding on the 17%, I guess in theory, if I'm thinking about it right, the state would then be out, if the collection fee were 35%, the state would be out 18% of the fines and costs because 17% of the 35% charged by the law firm would be covered by that collection fee. That's my understanding of why that 17% collection fee was added several years ago at this point.
So can I?
Mr. Chair, follow-up question?
Delegate Watts.
So, and I do have an additional question after this. So what you're basically saying is that the law firm or whomever is actually physically given 17% of the court fees and costs.
The law firm receives 35%, 17% of that 17% is covered by the 17% collection fee. They receive 35%, if that's what their contract is, or if their contract is 30%, the collection agency, the law firm, would receive the full 30%. But because the 17% is added on, that takes care of some of the 35% that the law firm is entitled to, and the net result is, instead of the state being out 35% of the fines and costs, with that 35% going to the law firm, the state is out less money because that 17% takes care of some of what the law firm gets.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, this is relatively confusing. May I do another follow-up on just this point?
Delegate Watts, you have the floor.
So what I'm trying to parse here, you're talking about 35%. You're talking about 35% of, let's say, court costs and fines were $500. 35% of that $500 is going to go to the law firm. Is that correct? Not added on, but 35% of the $500.
Let me, if I could answer it by this way, by using using $100 as the example, because it makes the math easier. So the person owes $100. When they're delinquent, it goes to collections, and what is owed is $117. That's the 17% added on. Then the law firm, if they have a 35% contract, would then get 35% of the 117, or 35% on the 100. But some of it's offset by the 17%. I'm sorry, it is quite confusing, and our systems do all of this automatically, but that is what current law would require.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a final follow-up question.
Okay.
So that what you're saying, when they go delinquent, definition, which I think comes back to the bill of when they go delinquent, is from the moment actually that $100 court costs and fees were entered. It doesn't have another date that is later after sentence served.
Actually, the statute provides that they're delinquent at 90 days if they haven't paid, and I don't have the statute right in front of me, or if they're entered into a payment agreement. So let's say someone's not incarcerated, just by way of example. So if someone owes $100 in fines and costs and they walk out of the courtroom and go to the clerk's office, if they enter into a payment agreement to pay $10 every month, they would not be delinquent ever if they paid that $10 every month. As long as they're on a payment plan and paying as they agree to, then they would not become delinquent. If the defendant walks out of the courtroom and doesn't go to the clerk's office and doesn't enter into a payment agreement, they would be delinquent 90 days after. It would be sent to collections 90 days after the fine was imposed, the fines and costs. So I know those are simple examples, but I hope they explain it a little bit more.
And I promised, Mr. Chairman, to my last request. So with what you
Second last request. All right, go ahead.
with what you just described, the individual who entered into a payment plan, your computer system that you say is all very automatic and would have to be reprogrammed, your computer system is already programmed to not automatically at 90 days make that person delinquent. So I'm not sure why we have the problem of reprogramming a rigid
I
computer.
didn't notice it earlier.
My understanding, and I certainly could verify this, but my understanding is that the clerk inserts the due date or the next payment date or the schedule, that the clerk manually inputs that information because the defendant may say, I can pay $20 a month, or I can pay it off in 6 months, and not a monthly payment. And if the defendant enters an agreement saying, I can't pay it today, but I can pay it in 6 months, then that gets entered into the system by the clerk, and then the programming takes over. So the issue here, just to explain, the system automatically imposes the 17% when it goes to collection. The system automatically sends it if someone's not abiding by their payment agreement or they're delinquent at 90 days. It goes to collection. The system automatically, if they have a case where they're incarcerated in Enrico GDC and they're incarcerated for 6 months, the judge orders a 6-month sentence, the system automatically says no interest for that 6 months and no interest for 180 days. And by the way, the other cases that they have in Enrico, no interest from 2 years ago, no interest on those cases anymore either while they're incarcerated and for 180 days after. So the problem is all these different pieces interact with each other in a really complicated way to hopefully do all these calculations and get it all right. So this would be a piece. Another piece that we would have to do, we'd have to undo how the other pieces are programmed in order to make this all work.
Okay, thank you. We've got several people that want to speak to this, so I'm going to ask, you'll get the last word, Delegate, but if we can just go ahead and quickly go through
Sure.
your
Mr.
testimony.
Chairman, Amy Woolard with Legal Aid Justice Center. We do support the legislation. The reasons Delegate Herring has brought up and that Delegate Price has brought up, fines and fees are already not predicated on a person's ability to pay. Being incarcerated multiplies that effect. This would be a small piece to make sure people could land on their feet more easily when they come out of incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I believe we have some people online who signed up. Let's see. We'll start with those who've indicated they're in favor of the legislation. Francis Ross. No answer. Okay. Dominique Martin. No answer. Okay. And Dr. Scarborough.
Good morning again, committee. Thank you so much. I am here to talk in favor of this legislation. I will try to be brief. While I do understand that there are certainly changes and implementation difficulties that would need to be made if this were to go into effect, I really want to think about ultimately what is our goal. What is our goal with folks coming back into our community? I did not see these issues in this manner years ago until I started working in this environment in 2008 when I went into the Richmond jail as a researcher for 5 years and then worked as program director for 5 years. I really didn't see the complexities that folks had. I figured just do right, get out of jail, do right, and everything's going to be fine. But in working with literally thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals coming out of incarceration and while they're incarcerated, it is about nearly impossible for them to come out and be successful with the way that things are set up. Not asking for a free ride, not asking, saying don't incarcerate or anything like that, but in the community and while they're incarcerated, if there's anything that we can do to just ease the transition. There are already so many issues with finding a job, finding a landlord, finding, all of those things, rekindling with family, and with these hefty fines that are placed on them while they're incarcerated. We have folks in our program that literally come out of a handful of years of incarceration, rightfully so, but with $10,000 to $15,000 worth of debt. And again, if they're only making $12, $13 an hour and working and paying child support and possibly paying restitution, is it practical to pay off this large amount? And my question for the committee would be, do we want these individuals to continue in the same cycle, to drain the system, to be a burden, or do we want them to really be successful tax-paying, law-abiding citizens? And not that you can't be law-abiding if you have hefty fees that you have to pay off. However, it is my goal and what we do in real life, and I hope it is your goal too, to really set folks up to be the best they can be, to be successful, especially after they have served their time. And a huge contributor of this would be if they didn't have these large amounts of debt coming out of incarceration. It would just be one more tool in the toolbox to really set them up to be successful when they get out. And if they decide not to, we have a system in place to deal with that.
Right.
But for many,
Okay, thank you. All right.
thank you.
All right, we've got two more people. The Honorable Bethany Harrison. Not in the room. Clarissa Berry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope I'm there. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Clarissa Berry. I'm the Commonwealth Attorney for Madison County, and I'm appearing on behalf, in my personal capacity rather than on behalf of VACA. I don't have a position as it relates to the cost and the fees. I think that's a policy decision that the General Assembly is well equipped to make. Regarding the restitution, however, I do have a concern that that language is included in this bill. For example, we had a defendant come into a sizable inheritance. He owed $10,000 in restitution on obtaining money by false pretenses. And one of the only ways that we could collect that was to intercept it upon that receipt. Also, I know that you're also familiar with the order for restitution, one of the results of, I believe, Delegate Bell's work. And that order has in it a requirement for when the payment is due in full to the clerk's office. It talks about when you're going to have a hearing. It contains information on it when the restitution interest begins. Does it accrue from the date of damage? Does it accrue from the order? Does it accrue from some other date? I receive, as required by law, a list of restitution accounts that are due in the Madison County Circuit Court. And I can tell you that the due dates on a lot of them do include period after the release from incarceration. And so it's quite a sizable time already, so they're not yet delinquent, as the lady from OAS mentioned. With those concerns, thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
All right, thank you. All right, well, and like I said, Delegate, I'll give you the last word, but before you do, just tell me if I have any of this wrong. So, based on what I'm hearing from the Office of the Executive Secretary and from you and from the others, you have someone who commits a crime or convicted of a crime. They're sentenced, they're given a period of probation that's conditioned on them paying fines and costs or restitution within a certain period of time. That the court has payment plans that are set up, can be as low as, say, $10 a month. There's no interest being accrued to that if they're incarcerated, and there's no collection fee imposed if they pay within the time frame that their probation is conditioned on. But your bill says if someone then fails to pay and becomes delinquent, and then there's a collection effort made, the statute, as it exists, says that the cost of that collection effort can be no higher than 17%. So it may be 33%, but the defendant's not going to bear the cost of that because it's 17%. And you're saying, let's make it easier and take away the 17%. Let's have them bear no cost of the delinquency.
So,
is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would say that's incorrect, with all due respect from the intent. So I know there have been a lot of examples that have been given, but I do want to draw your attention to Section E, where it says a period during which the defendant is incarcerated. So all of the hypotheticals that are being given when someone has been released do not apply to this bill. And then the definition in Section G for incarcerated and incarceration do apply to while they are incarcerated. And so this isn't about going to the court's office and making payments. Like, this is while they're incarcerated. So it does not change the 17%, the 35%, all of the complicated math that was being done. What it does is it changes the day that those percentages would apply, to not apply to while the individual is still incarcerated to 90 days after.
All right. Let me ask counsel, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think it does apply to people who have been released for that 90-day period after they've been released. Yeah. So if they, so not technically always in, while they're incarcerated, because it does give them that 90-day grace period. So I think that's the only thing I can point out, is that there is a point where they could get out, go make arrangements to make a payment plan, and then make that payment plan. This also kind of goes with, if they're doing community service work within the jail, then they wouldn't be sent to collections because they're making an effort towards the payment as well.
So is it correct to say that it's only for the delinquent accounts?
Yes, the statute only requires that these be sent to collection for after 90 days of delinquency.
Okay. And so when is it the case that you would be incarcerated and not and be delinquent, not have an opportunity to pay on the condition of your release? I guess that's where I'm getting, like, in other words, yes, at some point they're incarcerated, but they first were delinquent before.
Right, so I'll go back to my original example for the constituent that gave us a call. Upon their release, they already had collections fees on their bill. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands what I'm talking about, is while a person is still incarcerated.
You mean from a previous delinquency? Is that what you mean? I mean, before that sentencing event?
The gentleman was sentenced for 12 years, served 12 years. Upon release, checked his balance. There were collection fees on there.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
All right.
follow up to your question for the patron.
Yes, sir.
Was that gentleman incarcerated prior to the 12 years and then released at some point and then reincarcerated?
Mr. Chair, I would answer the gentleman that this was for the 12 years and did not have a balance prior to going into jail for the 12 years for that incident.
Thank you for answering.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add, Delegate?
Yeah, I'm not delusional, I see where this is headed. But I would say that this does not, again, change any of the amounts that are due, just how we're defining delinquent within the system for those that are incarcerated.
Okay. All right, the bill's before the committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to lay this bill on the table.
All right, there's a motion to table in a second. Please record your vote on the electronic device.
Delegate Bell.
Motion to table, Bell votes aye.
Delegate Bell votes aye. Delegate Williams.
I vote aye. I didn't touch the thing.
Okay. Delegate Williams votes aye. Delegate Watts.
Nay.
Delegate Watts votes nay. Delegate Delaney.
Nay.
Delegate Delaney votes nay.
All right. Please close the roll. The motion carries 5-3 to lay the bill on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate.